They called her the Big E. But to the men who slept on her decks and bled in her corridors, she was something more. She was a floating city of steel, oil, and courage. A fortress that refused to sink. We are in Newport News, Virginia. The year is 1936. The air smells of burning coal and welding ozone. Amid the roar of jackhammers and the blinding glare of torches, a massive keel is being laid. It's not just another ship. It's the birth of a legend. Hull number 369. The Yorktown class. The USS Enterprise, CV-6. In that shipyard, thousands of workers didn't know they were forging the destiny of the Pacific Ocean. They were building the backbone of a war that didn't yet exist. Every rivet, every armor plate, every boiler tube was installed with a precision that, years later, would make the difference between life and death for an entire nation. This is not just the story of an aircraft carrier. This is the autopsy of an engineering marvel. We're going inside the factory that built the Gray Phantom. We're going down into its bowels, where the heat was infernal, and up to its bridge, where history was written with fire and salt water. To understand why the Enterprise survived where others perished, you need to look at its skeleton. It wasn't built for comfort. It was built for speed and violence. Over 250 meters long, its flight deck was a deadly dance floor made of teak wood over steel. Why teak? Because steel became slippery with oil and blood, but would absorb the impact and kept the plane steady. Beneath the waterline, the heart of the beast beat with the fury of 9 Babcock and Wilcox boilers. They fed 4 massive Parsons turbines, generating 120,000 horsepower. When the captain demanded flank speed, the Enterprise didn't sail, it tore through the ocean at 32 knots. Imagine being in the engine room. The heat is stifling, reaching 50 degrees Celsius. The noise is deafening. Shirtless men, covered in grease, monitor violently trembling gauges. They are the invisible muscle. If they fail, the ship stops. And a ship stopped in the Pacific is a dead ship. But the real innovation was in its damage control capability. The Shipyard designed watertight compartments and redundant pumping systems. The Enterprise was designed to take punches that would have split other ships in two. And it would take those punches. Many of them. December 1941. The world changes. The Enterprise escapes Pearl Harbor by sheer chance, but returns to find the battleship fleet ablaze. The era of the giant guns is over. The era of the aircraft carrier has begun. The factory had created a complex machine, but now the crew had to transform it into a living weapon. The flight deck becomes a choreographed ballet of danger. Propellers spinning inches from human heads. The acrid smell of high-octane aviation gasoline. The steam from the catapults. At Midway, the Enterprise proved its worth. Its planes broke the back of the Imperial Japanese Navy. But glory comes at a cost. The following months would test the engineering of Newport News to its absolute limit. Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands. The Enterprise is hit. Bombs pierce the flight deck, exploding in the ship's bowels. The rudder locks. She is wounded. But it is here that the legend of the Gray Ghost is born. The Japanese reported having sunk her. The American aircraft carrier is at the bottom of the sea, they said. But the Enterprise's repair teams, welders, electricians, firefighters, worked like demons in the midst of hell. They patched the hull while the ship was moving. They pumped out the water. They extinguished the fires. And weeks later, there she was again on the horizon. The ghost ship. There was a moment in the war when the United States Navy in the Pacific was reduced to a single operational aircraft carrier. That aircraft carrier was the USS Enterprise. On deck, the crew painted a defiant phrase, Enterprise versus Japan. She held the line alone. A single creation of steel against an entire empire. As the war progressed, the Enterprise evolved. The original shipyard gave it its shape, but the war modified it. It became a porcupine of anti-aircraft guns. Its side bridges were filled with dozens of 40mm Bofors and 20mm Oerlikon cannons. When an air attack began, the entire ship trembled with the recoil of the guns. The sky around the Enterprise became a solid wall of incandescent lead. The sailors operating these weapons had no protection. They were strapped to their seats, looking up at the sky, watching enemy planes dive directly at them. They trusted the steel beneath their feet. They trusted that the ship would withstand the brutal evasive maneuvers, where the Enterprise tilted so much that the edge of the flight deck almost touched the water. 1945. Okinawa. The kamikaze threat. A suicide pilot dives from the clouds. He passes through the barrier of fire. He hits the Enterprise. The explosion launches the ship's forward elevator, a massive piece of steel weighing several tons, more than 100 meters into the air. The ship shudders. Fire consumes the deck. Any other ship would have been abandoned. But this is the Enterprise. Damage control kicks in. Seawater floods the lower compartments to balance the weight. Within hours, she wasn't just floating. She was ready to fight, but the damage was too severe to remain on the front lines. She returned home, wounded, but alive. The USS Enterprise, CV-6, earned 20 battle stars. More than any other ship in the history of the United States Navy. She was in almost every major battle. She sank rival submarines, cruisers, battleships, and aircraft carriers. But the enemy she couldn't defeat was time. After the war, there were attempts to turn her into a museum, a sanctuary for the memory of those who fought. But politics and lack of funds sealed her fate. In the late 1950s, Big E, the savior of the Pacific, the masterpiece of Newport News, was towed to a junkyard in New Jersey. There, the same blowtorches that gave her life dismantled her piece by piece. It was a silent tragedy. To see the mighty hull being cut up. To see the bridge, where legendary admirals watched the horizon, reduced to scrap. But they couldn't destroy the legacy. The Enterprise's steel was recycled, scattered around the world in new buildings, cars, and perhaps other ships. They say ships have souls. If that's true, the soul of the CV-6 never died. It resides in the memory of naval engineering, in the standard of excellence it established. It was the perfect machine for humanity's most imperfect moment. The gray ghost that refused to die, even after being dismantled.